The day my mother walked into that kitchen and heard everything, and I mean everything, was the day I understood that 25 years of marriage had slowly hollowed me out from the inside, and I hadn't even noticed until there was almost nothing left to hollow. But let me back up, because to understand what happened in that kitchen in December, you need to understand how we got there. My name is Valerie. I'm 45 years old, and I've spent the last 18 years as a certified personal trainer at a mid-size fitness center in Millhaven, Ohio, one of those old steel belt cities that never quite recovered after the mills shut down in the 90s. The kind of place where the downtown still has 3 empty blocks where a factory used to be, where the diner on 5th has been open since 1962 and everybody knows your order, and where people stay because their parents stayed and their grandparents stayed, and leaving feels like a betrayal of something you can't quite name. I love Millhaven. I love the ugly, stubborn, complicated thing it is. I love that my clients are mostly working-class women who squeeze a 6 a.m. session in before their shift at the hospital or the school district, and that they actually show up. I love that when I walk into the gym at dawn, I feel like I'm doing something that matters in a place that needs things to matter. I also love my condo. I bought it myself, 11 years into my marriage, with money I'd saved from training private clients on the side. It's a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a converted 1920s textile building near the river. Exposed brick, high ceilings, original hardwood floors that creak in a way that sounds like history. I furnished it piece by piece, repainted the kitchen myself 3 weekends in a row, hung blackout curtains in the bedroom, because I wake up at 5 every morning and I need those extra 40 minutes of dark. My 2 cats, Marble and Soot, have lived there with me for 6 years. Marble is a grey tabby who sleeps on the radiator all winter and judges everyone equally. Soot is a small, neurotic black cat who knocks things off counters specifically when you're watching, and then acts confused. They are, without question, the most emotionally consistent relationships in my life. I say that now, and I mean it more than I did when I thought I was joking. My husband is Derek Calloway, 50 years old, former project manager at a mid-sized logistics company, broad-shouldered in the way that used to mean something when we were young, with the kind of easy smile that makes strangers think he's the most agreeable man in any room. And for a long time, a genuinely long time, I believed that smile too. We met when I was 19 and he was 24, got married 2 years later, and by the time this story begins, we had been together for 27 years and married for 25. 25 years. I want you to sit with that number for a second, because I did. I sat with it every anniversary, every New Year's Eve, every time someone at the gym asked how long I'd been married, and I said 25 years, and they looked at me with this expression that was half admiration and half something else I couldn't name. I thought it meant we had built something durable. I thought duration was the same as depth. I was wrong about a lot of things. Derek lost his job in September. Not dramatically, no firing, no scandal. The company restructured, his position was eliminated, and he got a 4-week severance and a handshake. He was calm about it, which I actually respected at first. He said he'd have something new lined up within 6 weeks, 8 tops. He'd been in logistics management for over a decade. His network was solid. It would be fine. It was not fine. By November, he had applied to exactly 4 positions, turned down 2 phone screens because he felt the roles were beneath his level, and spent the majority of his days watching financial news on the couch and telling me the job market was uniquely hostile to people with his particular skill set. When I pointed out that we were burning through savings, he reminded me that I was still working and that my income was enough to keep the lights on. When I pointed out that my income was designed to supplement ours, not carry both of us, he got very quiet, and then very reasonable in that way that always made me feel like I was the unreasonable one. This was the pattern. This had always been the pattern, actually, and I had spent 25 years being so close to it that I couldn't see the shape of it. The condo idea was mine. It came to me in early December, on a Tuesday morning, standing in the gym's parking lot at 5:45, watching my breath fog in the cold air. If we rented out the condo, my condo, the one with the exposed brick and the creaking floors and marble sleeping on the radiator, we could bring in somewhere between $1,400 and $1,600 a month. That money, combined with my training income, would give us real breathing room while Derek figured out his next move. The catch was that we'd need somewhere to live. And the obvious answer, the answer I didn't love but couldn't argue with financially, was my parents' house. My parents, Donna and Harold, lived 20 minutes away in the same Millhaven neighborhood where I grew up. They have a finished basement with a separate entrance, a full bathroom, and enough space for 2 adults and 2 cats, provided the cats behaved themselves, which they would not, but my mother loves marble, so we'd survive. I talked it through with Derek over dinner. He liked the idea immediately, which should have told me something. He was enthusiastic in the specific way he got when a plan required effort from someone else. He nodded, said it was smart, said my parents were generous people, and then asked what we'd do with the rental income. Pay down the credit card, build the emergency fund back up, maybe set aside some for... Right, he said. Yeah, that makes sense. We moved into my parents' basement the second week of December. My mother, Donna, is 68 years old and has the energy of a woman 20 years younger and the opinions of a woman who has earned the right to have them. She was warm about the arrangement. She made Derek feel welcome in the particular way she has, which involves feeding people constantly, asking questions, and quietly observing everything. She also, from day one, cooked for us, every dinner, without being asked. Because that's who my mother is. She cooks when she loves people, and she cooks when she's worried, and she cooks when she doesn't know what else to do with the feelings. And for the first week, it was genuinely lovely. It felt like being held by something sturdy when I was too tired to hold myself up. Derek thought it was great. He said so multiple times. He started referring to my mother's cooking in the present tense, and with a frequency that began to feel less like gratitude and more like planning. The condo went up on a rental listing the 3rd week of December. Within 4 days, I had a qualified tenant, a nurse named Patricia, who worked night shifts at Millhaven General and needed a quiet place with good insulation and in-unit laundry. She signed a 12-month lease, $1,450 a month. First month plus security deposit came to $2,900, wired directly to my account, because the condo was in my name and my name only and always had been. I felt, briefly, like a person who had a handle on things. Then my phone rang. It was my cousin Renata. Now I need to tell you about Renata because she matters, and because I've spent a lot of years minimizing how much she matters in ways that ultimately cost me. Renata is 42, 3 years younger than me, and she grew up 2 miles from where I did. We were close as kids, close enough that people used to mix up our names at family gatherings, close enough that she was in my wedding. But somewhere in our 30s, something shifted between us. I told myself it was just adult life pulling people in different directions. I told myself she was just a little self-absorbed, a little competitive, and that was normal for family. What I hadn't fully let myself see was that Renata had spent the last several years wrapping herself around my life in ways that looked like caring, but felt, when I examined them closely, like something else. She knew my finances better than my own accountant. She knew which clients I'd lost and why. She knew when Derek and I had argued and what about, and I had never once told her directly. She gathered it somehow, the way certain people gather information about others, the way some people gather useful objects, just in case. When she called that December evening, I was in my parents' kitchen reheating leftovers, and Derek was in the basement watching something on his laptop. "I heard about the condo," she said, before I'd even finished saying hello. I felt the small, familiar tightening in my chest that I'd taught myself to ignore. "Yeah, found a tenant pretty quickly, actually. Starts January 1st. "That's great," she said. And then, after a pause that was just a beat too long, "Derek must be relieved." "We're both relieved," I said. "Of course," she said. "Of course you are." Another pause. "So what are you going to do with the rental income?" I told her the same thing I'd told Derek. Pay down debt, rebuild savings, get stable. "Smart," she said. "Very smart. You know, I was actually talking to Aunt Gloria last week and she mentioned that Derek's mum has been having a hard time lately. Financially, I mean. The heating bill. You know how those old houses are in December." She was saying she didn't know how Marlene was going to manage this winter. I didn't say anything right away because I recognized what was happening, but I needed a second to make sure I was recognizing it correctly. Derek's mum has her own savings, I said, and Derek's brother Ray contributes to her expenses. Oh, I know, Renata said quickly. I'm just saying what Aunt Gloria mentioned. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure you guys are handling it. We hung up a few minutes later, and I stood in my parents' kitchen with the feeling that something had just been set into motion that I hadn't agreed to. I brought it up with Derek that night, casually. I asked if he'd talked to his mum lately, if she was okay for the winter. He shrugged. She's fine. Ray's got it. Okay, I said. Why? He asked. Renata called, I said. Said something about your mum struggling with heating bills. He made a face that was hard to read. Not surprise exactly, something more like a man who has been caught holding information he didn't offer. Renata needs to mind her own business. Which didn't answer my question at all, and I noticed that. But I was tired, and December was already heavy, and I told myself we'd circle back to it. We did not circle back to it. 2 weeks later, 2 days before Christmas, my mother came in from the backyard where she'd been filling the bird feeder, and she stopped in the doorway of the kitchen without us hearing her come in. Because what she heard stopped her there. She heard Derek on the phone. She heard him say clearly, in the voice he uses when he thinks he's being practical and reasonable, Mum, I told you it's already sorted. The rent money's coming in January. I'll get it to you. Val's mum feeds us anyway, so it's not like we need it for anything here. I was in the hallway. I had heard it too. My mother stood in the doorway with snow on her boots and the bird feeder scoop still in her hand, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us said a single word, and then she walked in. My mother didn't say a word at first. She set the bird feeder scoop down on the counter, very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands need something to do, so they don't do something else. And she looked at me, standing in the hallway doorway, and I looked at her, and the whole kitchen felt like it was holding its breath. Then she walked to the stove, turned on the burner under the kettle, and said quietly, Go downstairs and get your husband. Her voice was the temperature of January concrete. I went. Derek was sitting in the basement on the pull-out sofa we'd set up, laptop open, some kind of market analysis playing on the screen. He looked up when I came in, and I must have had something on my face, because he immediately said, What? Mum wants us both upstairs, I said. Why? Come upstairs, Derek. He came. He was doing that thing he does where he walks slightly too casually, the deliberate looseness in his shoulders that signals he's already preparing a defense for something. I had learned to read that walk the way you learn to read weather. We stood in the kitchen, all three of us, while the kettle started to murmur on the stove. My mother didn't look at either of us for a moment. She just stood with her back to the counter, arms crossed, and I noticed that she still had her coat on, still had snow on her boots, and she hadn't taken any of it off. I heard what you said, she told Derek. Not accusatory, just a statement of fact, the way you'd confirm a flight departure time. Derek opened his mouth. Don't, she said. He closed it. You told your mother, she continued, still in that same flat, even tone, that the rent money was coming to her, $1,450 a month, from my daughter's condo, that she bought, that she arranged, that she listed and found a tenant for while you were watching television in my basement. She paused. And you explained this generosity by pointing out that I feed you anyway, so you don't need it. The kettle started to whistle. My mother turned and took it off the burner without looking at Derek. She poured water into a mug, slow and deliberate, and the steam rose up between us like something being released. I want to understand something, she said. When you told Marlene the money was coming to her, was that something you'd discussed with Valerie? Silence. She looked at him. Derek. It was something I was going to bring up, he said. Was it? Val, come on, he said, turning to me. My mom's heating bill is... Your mother's heating bill, I said, and I heard my own voice come out strange, lower than usual, slower. is not why we rented out my condo. I know that. I was just going to... You told her the money was already sorted, I said. You said I'll get it to you. You said it was coming in January. That's not something you were going to bring up. That's a promise you made without asking me. He did the thing. The slow exhale, the measured look, the slight tilt of the head that meant you're being emotional and I'm being rational. I had seen that look approximately 400 times in 25 years, and every single time it had worked on me, had made me feel like my feelings were the problem and not whatever he'd done. It didn't work this time. I don't fully know why it didn't work that time and not some other time. Maybe it was that my mother was standing 3 feet away and she had snow on her boots and she had not taken off her coat, and there was something about that image, this 68-year-old woman who had fed us every night for 2 weeks, who had put fresh towels in the basement bathroom and moved things around in the pantry to make room for us, who had not once, not one single time, made us feel like a burden, standing there in her kitchen in her winter coat because she had just come in from filling the bird feeder and stumbled into the evidence of exactly how her generosity was being accounted for. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was December, and I was tired and tired of being tired. I don't know, but the look didn't work. I need to know, I said, if you actually transferred anything, or told her a specific date. He was quiet for a beat too long. Derek. I told her January 1st, he said. The room went very still. January 1st was the date Patricia's first rent payment was due, the date the money would arrive in my account, the date Derek had apparently already assigned to a purpose without mentioning it to me. I sat down at my parents' kitchen table. I didn't plan to, my legs just made that decision. I sat down in the chair I'd sat in every morning as a kid, the one closest to the window, the one where the light comes in at an angle in the winter and turns everything amber, and I put my hands flat on the table and I looked at them. My mother poured a second mug of tea and set it in front of me without being asked. I think, she said to Derek, in the tone of a woman who has decided exactly how much of herself to spend on this moment, that you should go back downstairs. He went. He didn't argue. He didn't slam anything. He just went, and the basement door clicked shut behind him, and my mother pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, and we sat there in the amber light with our tea, and neither of us said anything for what felt like a long time. How long has this been going on? She asked finally. I don't know, I said, and then, because she was my mother and she had snow on her boots and she deserved the truth. A long time. I think a long time. She nodded slowly. She wrapped both hands around her mug. The Renata thing, she said. It wasn't a question. I looked up. I've watched that girl for 20 years, my mother said. She's not your friend, Valerie. I've never said it because it wasn't my place and you would have defended her. But she's the one who told Aunt Gloria about Derek's mother, and Aunt Gloria told me, 3 days ago. I felt something shift in my chest. Not surprise exactly, more like the sensation of a piece of furniture moving after you've stubbed your toe on it in the dark for so long you forgot it was there and just started walking differently. She knew, I said. She knew what she was doing when she called me. She was softening the ground, my mother said. Preparing you to accept the idea before Derek brought it up, so that when he did, you'd already been halfway talked into it and it wouldn't seem as outrageous. I thought about that phone call. The pause before Derek must be relieved, the careful mention of Marlene and the heating bill, the, I'm just saying what Aunt Gloria mentioned, I'm sure it's fine. The way it had planted something in me that I'd tried to dismiss, but hadn't quite managed to. They planned this, I said. My mother didn't answer right away. She took a sip of her tea. I think Derek told his mother the money was coming. I think Marlene told someone, maybe Ray, maybe someone else, and it got back to Renata. Whether Renata and Derek coordinated or whether Renata just decided to run interference on her own because she enjoys being useful to people who might owe her something later, I honestly couldn't tell you. But the effect is the same. The effect is the same. I sat with that. I sat with the full weight of it. The condo I'd bought with my own savings, the tenant I'd found, the security deposit sitting in my account, and the fact that my husband had apparently made a promise about that money to his mother before January 1st had even arrived, and had organised a quiet little information campaign around me to make the whole thing easier to swallow. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Here is what I want you to do tonight," she said. "I want you to sleep. I want you to let your body rest, because you look like you haven't slept in weeks, and you probably haven't. And tomorrow morning, before you do anything else, I want you to call your bank, and I want you to ask them what it would take to add a secondary alert on your account, so that you know the instant any money moves." I stared at her. "I'm 68 years old," she said, "and I have watched 3 women in this family lose money they earned to men who were very pleasant at the dinner table. I am not watching a 4th. She squeezed my hand once, firmly, and let go. "Drink your tea." I drank my tea. I didn't sleep well that night. Derek came to bed around midnight. I know because I heard the basement stairs creak and then the click of the bathroom door. And I lay in the dark with my eyes open and soot curled against my ankles and marble a warm weight on the radiator. And I thought about 25 years. I thought about every time I'd been the unreasonable one. Every time the look had worked. Every time I'd circle back to something and then not circle back to it. I thought about the 4 positions Derek had applied to in 3 months. The 2 phone screens he'd declined because the roles were beneath his level. I thought about Patricia, my tenant, the nurse, moving her things into my condo on New Year's Day. The exposed brick and the creaking floors and the blackout curtains. And I thought about how I'd built that place the way you build something you intend to keep. At 5 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went upstairs. My mother was already in the kitchen. She had the coffee going, and she was standing at the window in her bathrobe, watching the backyard go grey with first light. And when she heard me, she turned and said, "Sit down." And I sat down, and she poured me a cup without asking. "I need to talk to someone," I said. "Not a friend, not family, someone who knows what I'm looking at legally." She nodded. She had been waiting for me to say it. I could see that she'd been waiting. "I know someone," she said. "Linda Marsh. She's a family law attorney over in Clarendon. She helped Connie Belts when Connie's husband tried to put her house in his mother's name." She paused. "That's not exactly your situation, but it's close enough that Linda will know what she's looking at." "Mom, I'll call her this morning." "Mom, I haven't decided anything yet." She looked at me across the table with the patience of a woman who has watched her daughter not decide things for a very long time. "I know," she said, "but knowing your options isn't the same as deciding, and right now you need to know what you're holding." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug. Outside, the yard was getting lighter, the snow on the bird feeder catching the first pale colors of the day. "He's going to say I overreacted," I said. "He's going to say it was just a miscommunication. He's going to do the thing with his voice where everything sounds so reasonable that I start to feel like the one who's being difficult." "I know he is," my mother said, "and part of me is going to want to believe him." "I know that too." She got up, refilled her own cup, and stood at the counter. "That part of you has been keeping you small for 25 years, Valerie. It's not a weakness. It's what happens when someone teaches you that your clearest instincts are the problem." She looked at me steadily. "But your instincts aren't the problem. They never were." I thought about the bird feeder scoop on the counter, the snow on her boots, the way she hadn't taken off her coat. "What if Linda Marsh tells me there's nothing I can do?" I said. "The condo is mine, the account is mine, but he's my husband. What if he has some kind of claim on the rental income just by being married to me?" "Then you'll know that," my mother said, "and you'll decide what to do with that information. But you need the information first." She was right. She was right in the way she was almost always right, which I had spent years being too busy or too defended to notice. I picked up my phone from the table where I'd set it when I came upstairs. I opened the Contacts app, and then I stopped. There was a text from Renata, sent at 11:40 the night before. "Hey, just checking in. Hope everything's okay over there. Let me know if you want to grab coffee this week." I read it twice. I thought about my mother's voice. She was softening the ground, ... I set my phone face down on the table. Not because I was ignoring it, because I needed 30 seconds where Renata's name wasn't looking up at me, while I decided what kind of person I was going to be when the sun came up. I called Linda Marsh at 8:15 that morning. My mother had already left the message on her answering service the previous night, so when I gave my name, her assistant said, "Yes, Miss Calloway, she's expecting you. Can you come in Thursday at 10? Thursday was 2 days away. I said yes. I spent those 2 days being very quiet. Derek noticed the quiet and seemed to interpret it as the prelude to forgiveness, which told me something. He was careful around me in the way he got careful when he knew he'd pushed too far, attentive in small ways, asking if I wanted coffee, complimenting my mother's soup at dinner, as if the performance of a grateful son-in-law might soften the edges of what he'd done. My mother watched all of this from across the table, with the expression of a woman reading a document she's already read before. I did not respond to Renata's text. On Wednesday evening, Derek came upstairs while I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, reviewing the lease I'd signed with Patricia. He stood in the doorway for a moment and then said, "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said. I didn't close the laptop. He sat down across from me. He had his reasonable voice on, the one that starts low and measured and builds towards something that sounds like an apology but lands like a verdict. "I should have talked to you first about my mom," he said. "I know that. I got ahead of myself." "You promised her $1,450, I said. "That's not getting ahead of yourself. That's making a financial commitment with someone else's money." "It's our money, Val." "No," I said. I was surprised by how steady my voice was. "It's not. The condo is in my name. The lease is in my name. The account the money goes into is in my name. You are welcome to earn income and contribute it wherever you choose. But you have not earned income in 3 months, Derek. You've applied to 4 jobs and turned down 2 interviews." He was quiet. "Your mother's heating bill," I said, "is not my responsibility to solve by giving away money I arranged from a property I bought while you watch financial news on my parents' couch." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "That's a cruel thing to say." And there it was, the reframe. My accurate description of events converted into cruelty. I'd seen it so many times that I almost let it land. Almost. "It's not cruel," I said. "It's the situation. Those are facts." He left the kitchen. I sat there until my heart rate came back down, and then I closed the laptop and went to bed. Linda Marsh's office was in a 2-story building in Clarendon, about 20 minutes from Millhaven. The kind of office that announces its purpose without drama. Wood-panelled walls, a waiting room with chairs that were comfortable enough to signal respect and plain enough to signal seriousness. Linda herself was in her early 60s, trim and direct, with the manner of someone who has heard every version of every story and has stopped being shocked, but has not stopped caring. I told her everything: the condo, the lease, Patricia, January 1st, the phone call my mother overheard. I told her about Renata. I told her about the 4 job applications and the 2 declined phone screens. I told her about 25 years of the look working on me, until one evening in December it stopped. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back slightly and said, "In Ohio, rental income from a property owned solely by one spouse can be considered marital income, depending on the circumstances and how it's handled. The fact that you bought the condo with your own pre-earned savings and it's titled solely in your name is significant. The fact that the rental income goes into a separate account solely in your name is also significant. If you want to protect that income, you need to keep it strictly separate. Don't commingle it with any joint account. Don't use it to pay joint expenses." "I haven't," I said. "Not yet." "Good. Keep it that way." She paused. "Now, are you here to protect the rental income, or are you here because this is the thing that finally made you look at the bigger picture?" I looked at the window behind her desk. There was a parking lot outside, ordinary and grey in the January light. "Both," I said. She nodded slowly. "Then I want to give you some information. Not advice about what to do, that's your decision, but information about what you're looking at." She spent the next 40 minutes walking me through it. Marital assets and separate property under Ohio law, the significance of the condo's title, what a legal separation meant versus a divorce, what documentation I should start gathering. She said the word documentation with the same calm weight my mother used when she said, "your options." When I left her office, I sat in my car in that grey parking lot for about 5 minutes. Then I drove back to Millhaven. My mother was in the kitchen when I got home. She took one look at my face and said, "How'd it go?" "Good," I said. "She was good." I set my keys on the counter. "I have a lot to think about." "You do," she said, and she did not push further, which was exactly right. What I hadn't expected was Renata. She showed up on Saturday afternoon, 3 days after my meeting with Linda. She knocked on my parents' front door, not my phone, not a text, the actual front door, and when my mother opened it, she was standing there in her coat with a container of something she'd baked and a smile that was doing a lot of work. "I was just in the neighbourhood," she said. "Thought I'd drop by and see how Val's settling in." My mother looked at her for one long beat. Then she stepped aside and said, "Come in." I heard the door from the basement. I came upstairs into the front hallway, and Renata was standing there with the container, some kind of banana bread, I could smell it, and she looked at me with the warm, slightly careful expression I'd seen 100 times and never named correctly until now. "Hey you," she said. "I was worried about you. You never texted back." Derek was in the basement. My mother was in the kitchen doorway, visible over Renata's shoulder. I thought about the softening of the ground. I thought about Aunt Gloria and what my mother had told me. I thought about the pause before Derek must be relieved. "I know what you did, Renata," I said. She blinked. "What?" "You called me to plant the idea of Marlene's heating bills before Derek could bring it up himself. You were running interference, making it easier for him to ask me to hand over money from my own property." I said it the same way my mother had said things, not loud, not heated, just factual, just the shape of the thing. Renata's face went through several expressions very quickly. The first was surprise, the genuine kind. The second was something more calculated. The third settled into a kind of injured dignity. "That's not... Val, I was just sharing what I heard from Aunt Gloria. I wasn't orchestrating anything." "Maybe you were, maybe you weren't," I said. "But you've been gathering information about my life for years, and using it in ways that benefit you or people you want to be useful to. I've watched you do it, and I've told myself it was just how you were. I'm done telling myself that." The injured dignity deepened. "I've always looked out for you, your family." "I know you think that," I said, "but looking out for someone doesn't mean feeding their husband information about how to get their money. That's not caring about me, Renata. That's managing me." She stood there for a moment. The banana bread container was still in her hands. She set it down on the little table in the entryway, the one with my parents' mail on it, and she looked at me with something that might have been genuine hurt underneath all the other layers, and I let myself see that. I didn't dismiss it, but I also didn't let it move me. "I think you should go," I said. She went. She didn't take the banana bread. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway the moment the front door closed. She looked at me. I looked at her. "Good," she said. One word. Then she went back to the kitchen. January 1st arrived the way January 1st does, quietly, with the kind of cold that has given up trying to impress anyone. Patricia's rent cleared my account at 7 in the morning. $1,450, exactly as agreed. I was awake when it came in. Of course I was. I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and both cats. Marble had decided my lap was acceptable, which he reserves for moments of his own choosing, and Soot was on the table itself, technically not allowed, but we were all making allowances that morning. I watched the notification come through on my banking app, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not relief exactly. More like the sensation of standing on ground that is actually solid after a long time of not being sure. I had already made my decision. I'd made it somewhere in the days between Linda Marsh's office and Renata's visit, in the spaces between the things I was saying out loud. I hadn't said it to Derek yet. I was going to, today. He came upstairs around 9. He'd been quieter all week, which I recognised as a different kind of quiet than mine. Watchful, waiting to see which way things were going to go. He poured himself coffee and stood at the counter and looked at me. "The rent came in," I said. He nodded. "I need you to call your mother today and tell her it's not coming to her. That you made a promise you shouldn't have made, and you're correcting it." I kept my voice even. "And I need you to tell her that because it's the truth, and because she deserves to adjust her expectations before she's counting on money that isn't going to arrive." He set his mug down. "Val, I'm not finished," I said. "I've been to see a family law attorney in Clarendon. Her name is Linda Marsh. I've started gathering documentation. I'm not telling you this to threaten you or to start a fight. I'm telling you because you deserve to know where I am and what I'm doing, the same way I deserve to know before you promise my rental income to your mother." I took a breath. "I don't know yet what I'm going to decide, but I know that I'm not going back to the version of our life where your look works on me and I feel like the unreasonable one for noticing things that are actually happening." He was very still. "If you want to try to build something different," I said, "then we start with the truth, starting with that phone call to your mother." Derek called Marlene that afternoon. I wasn't in the room, I gave him that, but I heard enough through the basement door to know he did it. His voice was low and uncomfortable, and it lasted about 12 minutes. When he came back upstairs, his jaw was set in the way of a man swallowing something that doesn't go down easily, and he said, "Done." And I said, "Thank you." That was not the end of things. It was closer to the beginning of the real reckoning, which took months and was not clean or simple, because 25 years of anything is not clean or simple to look at clearly. We went to counselling. Derek started actually applying for positions, real ones, not the ones he'd decided were beneath him, and by March he had a project manager role at a logistics firm in Columbus, which meant a long commute, but meant he was working. He moved out of my parents' basement and into a short-term rental while we figured out what we were figuring out. I moved back into the condo in July, when Patricia's 12-month lease ended and she relocated for a travel nursing contract. I walked back into those rooms, the exposed brick, the creaking floors, the blackout curtains, and I stood in the kitchen for a long time, just standing there. Marble went straight to the radiator. Soot knocked a spatula off the counter and looked at me like I had done it. Some things I did not save. I will not pretend otherwise, and I will not dress it up. Derek and I are not together. The counselling helped us see the shape of things clearly enough to understand that the shape wasn't one we could keep living inside. And there is grief in that, real grief, the kind that doesn't care whether you made the right decision. The kind that shows up at odd moments and sits with you whether you invited it or not. 25 years is 25 years. You don't walk away from that without carrying something. But I am not small anymore. That is the thing I keep coming back to. The thing I feel in my body when I wake up at 5 in the morning and the apartment is dark and marble is on the radiator and soot is somewhere causing minor property damage and the light is about to come in. I am not small anymore. And I hadn't understood, until I stopped being small, how much of my energy had gone into maintaining that smallness. The constant internal negotiation, the softening of my own perceptions, the making of space for the look to work on me. My mother still feeds me on Sundays. She doesn't ask about Derek. She asks about my clients, about the gym, about whether I've fixed the dripping faucet in the condo bathroom. She fills the bird feeder every morning in December, and she takes off her coat when she comes inside. Some months, I look at the $14.50 coming into my account on the 1st, and I think about what Derek said on the phone to his mother. "Val's mum feeds us anyway, so it's not like we need it for anything here." I think about my mother, standing in the kitchen doorway with snow on her boots, and the bird feeder scoop in her hand, and the temperature of January concrete in her voice. She fed us because she loved us. Not because we didn't need anything else. Not because our needs had been accounted for and the surplus could be redirected. Because she loves her daughter, and that is what she does with love. She makes it into something warm and sets it in front of you, without asking for anything in return. The difference between that and what Derek did with her generosity is the whole story, really. It's the whole 25 years of it, compressed into one overheard phone call in a kitchen in December. I know the shape of it now, and I'm not standing close enough to lose it again.